Hello and welcome to another episode of Unmuted. I'm your host, Courtland Warren, and we're going to take a very common topic, theme, not just in the world of personal development, but truly in life. Like if I ask you, I say, well, what is a key to the success of any relationship? What would you say? When I ask that question, it's usually not very many responses before, if not the first response, that is communication. I ask, well, what is the key or a key to the success of any relationship is what? Communication. And oftentimes that'll lead into an exercise around listening or for a person to look at their communication style. And recently, as I've been exploring ways to improve my communication, not only with audiences, but in the area of parenting, in the area of relationship, in business, like there's very little that can truly grow and expand without mastery of communication. It's simple to understand. And what's interesting about communication is that no one will really admit that they're not very good at it. And that's because we communicate from the place of our perspective and from our life experiences. And so it is that oftentimes an individual person, Courtland, like I too, am guilty of believing that my way of communicating is right and proper. Like the way I'm expressing it, the way I'm getting it across is the correct way. And oftentimes, even when it's evident that it's not effective, we don't really have places to go search and look, right? When the evidence is there that the communication is not effective, where do you really go? Like truly, where do you really go to learn how to be more effective in communication with a particular individual? Part of, I think, the challenge is the idea that there is a template for communication. And that once you figure it out with one person, then carrying that into a different situation, be it personal or professional, is an error. Okay? Why? Because ultimately communication is a reflection of life experiences and events and how-tos. Not very long ago, I looked into my life, and one of the things that I noticed was that one of the drawbacks of being raised by a single mom was that I never got to experience conflict resolution. I never got to see it. It was a very foreign idea to me. It was like, mom said it, and that's the way it is. And I'm divorced now, but I don't think she would mind me saying that when I was married, there was a great deal of Courtland that was, well, this is how it is. With my children, well, this is how it is. And not that I would even look at that and say, well, that was right. I mean, obviously, even as I speak it, intellectually, I get that there's a more effective way. But there is the law. See, I'm firm in my idea that there's always science that can be applied. And truly understanding a person is a result of understanding the science. Particularly, I'm talking about now the cause and effect, or Newton's law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Okay? So nothing just happens. Nothing just occurred. There was a cause, and then the occurrence or the experience is then the effect. Okay? So to truly understand and appreciate a person requires an understanding of the experiences or the cause that are leading to the effect. It's one thing to, particularly for leaders, and that's really who I'm looking to target, is leaders who are looking to develop your people, and you want to get more out of your people, you want to get more out of your relationship. It is important to understand that traumatic events, traumatic experiences are not just experiences to get over, but really to understand that it's those events and experiences that shape a person's belief system, belief structure, and ultimately how they behave and show up in the world. I am certain that this is one of the reasons why I limit my judgment of people and how they respond and how they act, because I've conditioned myself to truly ask, what was the event or the experience that led to that behavior? How did that happen? What occurred? So when I look at my failings in communication, I started to explore. Well, I never got to see conflict resolved at home. It was, mom said it. That's how it is. In fact, to go way back to like on the day my dad left home, the night before, I was in trouble. There was an argument. The first argument that I witnessed my parents even have was the moment when he was leaving. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, my conditioning programming, which is how our belief structures are formed through our life experiences, right? As far as I'm concerned, like growing up, right? I'm looking at it, I'm like, arguments mean that relationship ends. The argument means that someone's leaving. And even in relationship, that was, man, for a long time, that was my go-to. My go-to was, we're arguing, all right, who's leaving, me or you? It's not funny, but it was like, when I look at it now, I was like, come on, man, come on, Court, right? But if you've not seen it, see, choice is a function of awareness. I can't judge a choice that a person makes until I'm aware of what options they were aware of. Okay, so not ever seeing conflict resolved, and then the event or the traumatic event or experience of seeing my dad leave home as a result of an argument or fight. Got the idea? Okay. So then what happens is what gets embedded, what gets conditioned, the belief is that, oh, okay, when there's an argument, when there's a disagreement, when there's a fight, then relationship over, relationship done. And I would oftentimes like threaten that in relationship. Or, so I would threaten that in relationships. So, okay, well, hey, okay, leave. I guess that's it. And I was like, no, that does not mean that. Okay. So my experience, parents, married 4 years, boom. And then I was married to someone who I think our parents are now close to almost 50 years married. So there's been a lot of conflict resolution, a lot of, okay, we get over it. A lot of, all right, we move through it. Okay, we drop it and move on. But if that has not been the experience, you get the idea? Have I set this up enough for you? Belabored this enough? Okay. So even what I'm getting at here is, even in the area of something as simple, generalized, basic as communication, it is based on, and your effectiveness in doing it is a result of your experiences and the life events that have shaped you as a communicator. And be very cautious if you consider yourself a great communicator, because the likelihood is that you're not. The likelihood is that you're not, unless this is feedback that you got from someone else. The likelihood is that you've simply conditioned yourself to a way of communicating that was effective for you once, or that you determined you were going to be moving forward. But to carry that to a different person, right, is without understanding that person's events and experiences and the cause that led to their effect is it's limited. Okay, it's a limited view. Even in business, I had a client who reached out and said, "Oh, okay, we need to talk." Now, for whatever reason, that's not a warm fuzzy for me. We need to talk. Okay, so I'm like, oh man, I'm belaboring it, and then I'm like, okay, all right, okay, what's gonna happen? And then what went wrong? What did I do? I'm like, and then I avoided his text message and avoided a phone call. Because I couldn't land on anything that I had done, and I had to check myself and like, Courtland, you're not a kid who's in trouble. You're not about to get to detention. You're not about to get grounded, right? So what's up? And then it's like I had to like literally like snap out of it. Okay. So conflict resolution has not been a strength for me. So there are some things that I have to, okay, all right. So as I explore it, I come to understand it. Here are what I believe are some very foundational keys to conflict resolution. You can use these in your personal and professional life. And even when the conflict is within yourself. Okay. So personal, professional, solo, resolving conflict. It's key to having more effective experience in your life and world. First and foremost, when it's time to, when there is conflict and we're at the place of discussion and conversation and it's time to hash it out. First, you must declare the end game that you want. What is the ultimate outcome that you desire? That's the start. So before we, before this gets heated, before we start going at each other, if it's going to evolve into that, just in case that's where we end up, just in case that's where we land, just in case by some, form or measure, that gets lost in translation based on what I have to express and what you're going to express and the buttons that may get pushed and the triggers that might go off. Just in case any of that happens, I want to first establish that at the end of this, my desire is that we are together and that we're growing. My desire in this, right now we have some challenges within the business. We have some challenges in the organization. I have some challenges that I've got to express to you, and the feedback may not exactly be pleasant. You're not going to like some of what you're about to hear, but ultimately what I want you to know is that I see you as a continued part of this organization. Okay. All right. So you have to state the desired outcome. Even if that is not what happens, okay, you still state it because it lowers the guard and the defenses of the person that you're in communication with. See, if I'm not clear that ultimately you still want to do business with me or be in relationship or whatever the case may be, like if I'm not clear about that, or if you're not clear about that, then naturally your defense mechanism goes up, particularly based on your life experiences, because we all go into survival mode. Why? Because our primordial state of consciousness is that of survival. So just in case, right, you want to make sure that the person can actually hear what you're about to communicate, because it lessens their defenses. Now, recognize that sometimes the act or the event, the cause is so egregious that continuing is not possible. I still say you say that up front. Okay, it's like, so what I'm about to share is not easy, because I don't see how we can move forward. That being said, though, out of respect for you, I want you to understand why. Okay. So now, if I'm employed or, whatever, and my person, my, boss or whatever has that conversation, starts that way, so it's unlikely that we're going to move forward after this. But I want you, out of respect for you, I want you to understand why. Here's what happened. So first, you state the end. Okay. You state the end. That way, person, is not on guard and is not defensive, right? It's, it's like, okay, ultimately, we're going to end up there. And how we get there may be uncomfortable. It may be a little bumpy, but ultimately, that's where we'll end up. Okay, I'm good with that. The second thing to do is so we first declared where it is that you'd like to end up. The second stage then is to I want you to briefly, okay, get to the point. Once you declare what the ultimate outcome is, then whatever your upset is about, then you can, with brevity, when I say brevity, meaning like concise, direct, to the point of how you are feeling. Not even the what happened yet. See, if you go right into, well, here's what happened, here's what occurred, then you leave all of this room for, misinterpretation. And, well, that's not what happened, and that's not how it went. And now all of a sudden, the event or the experience becomes the main thing, when in truth, it's not the event or experience. Because events and experiences don't carry emotions and feelings with them. Events are neutral. Ultimately, no event means anything. Nothing means anything until we assign meaning to it. So the event or the experience has little meaning, okay? In fact, no meaning. We give it the meaning, and we give it the meaning based on our interpretation of events and experiences. So the second place, after declaring the outcome that you truly desire, is to go directly and definitively, precisely, and concisely into, this is how I feel. You don't leave a person to try to figure out what you're feeling about the event or experience or the cause, okay? So it's about, that's in my view, the vulnerability and the transparency. The vulnerability and the transparency is through your willingness to share what it is that you are feeling. Get right to what you feel. And what can save you a lot of time in communication is that once you have communicated how it is that you feel, then you listen for a reaction from the other parties involved, and note their reaction to how you're feeling. This will give you a glimpse into their level of care. So we want to first declare the outcome that you want. This is how I want this conversation to end up. It's not over. No one's leaving, and this has to be discussed. Got it? I'm hurt, or I'm disappointed, or I'm pissed off. Thirdly, you get into not the interpretation, but the facts of what occurred. The facts of what occurred. Not the interpretation, not the latest buzzwords in social psychology. The facts of what occurred and how you arrived at the place that you are currently feeling. If you stay with the facts of what occurred, then it leaves nothing for interpretation. Does that make sense? Okay. It leaves nothing for interpretation. This is what happened for me. And as a result of that, I now feel. Ultimately, here's where I want to end up. That's me going in reverse order. After you get into the facts, fourth is, what happened? That's the question that you're posing to the other person involved. What happened? And now you listen. And as you listen, you're not listening for proof of the facts as much as you're listening for the emergence, or you're listening for not the facts. You're listening for how they feel and are now responding to your upset. That's what you're listening for. You're listening for how they're responding to your upset. Now, as you're listening, you're going to hear a different version. And it is so important to understand that version that they share, okay, that version, that of the other side of even resentment, okay, the reason, the reason for resentment, okay, the why underneath resentment is an imbalance in perspective. The only reason I'm ever upset is because I'm seeing my side of it. That's it. The only reason, and I really hesitate to speak in absolutes, but just, we'll say generalize, okay? Resentment, but without question, resentment is an imbalance in perspective. The reason why I know that is because of the science, the law, polarity. In order for anything to exist, the opposite must exist also. In order for anything to exist, the opposite must also exist. So if I am in a place of resentment, it must mean that there is a space and a place for gratitude. It has to be that way. That's not a Courtland rule. That's not the Unmuted Podcast rule. That's life. If it exists, then it has to have the opposite. So if I'm resentful, it is because I have an imbalance in my perspective. So when I listen, when I ask now what happened, or when you ask what happened, then you're listening, okay, and note that you're going to hear a different perspective. The question now becomes, once you hear the other side, you hear this different perspective, are you then open to, one, being wrong? Have you ever been so upset that, and then you just acted out? Okay, you like really acted out during your upset, and then you get some information that reveals the truth, and you realize that you were way off base. You were totally down the wrong path, but you've acted out in such a way that it's like you're not able to recover it. Does that make sense? Like you've acted out in such a way that it's like, man, I can't even, I'm not even able to reel this back in because I've been such an ass. Okay, right? So sometimes what happens is we go so far down in our, resentment display and actions that the recovery, the eating of crow can be so embarrassing and humiliating that we just, I know I have done it. I'm just gonna stay here because the amount of crow I'm gonna have to eat, I'm just gonna stay. Right? Okay. So, but know that is a result of an imbalance in perspective. So when you ask like what happened, you've got to listen from, my recommendation is that you listen from a place of empathy and be willing to be wrong about your interpretation and what you've decided that it means. So after step 4, okay, which is what happened. Step 5 is a very, very important question. It's simply, where do you want to go from here? That's it. You've already see what the power in this is. You already stated the outcome that you want. Okay, you did that in the beginning. Then there's this conversation. You right. But then step 5 is, where do you want to go from here? Particularly after you've listened. Because there is no movement forward without the clear and decisive understanding that we're on the same page as it relates to what comes next. That part is oftentimes left out. We declare, well, most times there is no declaration of where you want to end up. We start in with, how I feel, feeling. Oftentimes the experience is first, and then we start in with how we feel, and then it's what happened, and then we're listening to what happened only in the way that validates what we're feeling, and then it's sometimes silence and quiet and so forth. But and then when the person who's upset eventually gets over it, then it's like, okay, we kind of pick up the pieces and we move forward, but without clarity of vision. And without the clarity of vision, it is inevitable that another misstep is going to happen. It's inevitable that another misstep will happen. I started exploring all of this, as a result of the past couple of weeks, and really looking at how important and how valuable communication is, both personally and professionally. And one of the things that I took note was that, of course, there are books that are written about it. But this explores, what I've shared with you here. This is not, you won't find a book on that one or, in Chat GPT. This is the result of working with people, real life, classroom settings, coaching, and so forth. And what actually gets in the way and what's missing. Guaranteed. If from the onset you don't assume that it's known, but you declare the outcome that you want after this uncomfortable situation, you're going to get more receptivity, more transparency, more vulnerability in the conversation. If you first state that the outcome that you want, particularly if the outcome that you want includes them. The second place to go is to not accusatory and not into the event, but with brevity, concisely articulate how you feel. Then listen. You're listening to see if whether or not the person is capturing and really allowing in the fact that someone they know or love or appreciate is hurting. Listen for, concisely move to the feeling. After you've expressed what you feel, then you move to the facts of what happened without embellishment. The facts. Here's what happens. Here's what I decided to do. When I decided to do that, here's what occurred. Thus, the feelings that I'm experiencing. After we go to the facts, then it's what happened. Now they share and you listen. And then after they've shared, your first question, before you go into details of this and what about this one, as though you're looking to catch them, trap them, it's much more effective if you then ask, where do you want to go from here? Based on how I feel, based on the facts, based on what you have now expressed happened, where do you want to go from here? And without establishing that you both desire to go the same place, then more upset is inevitable. A different type of talk on communication, I get it, but I promise you it works. And if you got value, don't keep it a secret. Let someone know that this exists. Let someone know that the podcast exists. And thank you for listening. I want you to become a part of the Courtland Warren newsletter and the Alchemy Circle. And you can do that. You can do that by just simply going to courtlandwarren.com and choosing into the digital newsletter. And monthly, I will share with you recent developments and insights in the space of personal development. And the purpose is to assist you transforming your life, finding your voice so that you can impact the world in a positive way. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.